Week 3, Environmental Health, Part 3. Vulnerable population in environmental health is children. Children have the biggest impact when it comes to environmental exposures. So what makes today's children at risk? Something to keep in mind is then, what is the leading cause of death due to disease in children? We know that's cancer. So why does children become more susceptible to environmental hazards than children? Why are children more susceptible to environmental hazards than adults? 1. Infant and children breathe more rapidly. Their breathing zones are lower, and they're closer in contact with chemical and biological agents on floors and carpets. Their blood-brain barrier is more immature. And infants and children have less effective filtering chemicals in their kidneys. Also, in fetal development, chemical exposure during fetal development, such as alcohol, smoking, lead and mercury in the fish, also can affect children's growth. There are 3 R's to keep in mind when we discuss environmental health. The 3 R's are reduce, reuse, and recycle. The levels of prevention, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary, teach to prevent the hazards. Secondary, screen for the problems due to exposures of chemicals and hazards. And 3, tertiary, treat the existing problems and help those that have been exposed to the hazards and prevent them from happening further. Here in the boxed information on the slide is how the EPA defines environmental risk. It used to be that the risk is equivalent to the magnitude of the problem, multiplied by the problem of the health and environmental exposure. However, this doesn't address the problem in its entirety. The new formula addresses the public's outrage to the probability. Risk equals the hazards multiplied by the outrage of the public. These are the phases the EPA uses when assessing the environmental risk. The first step is to assess the toxicology and epidemiology data. Why is this a risk? The second step is to determine if the chemical has been released into the environment. How has this been released? Air, water, food, soil? The next step is to estimate how much chemical might enter the body and how. Have they ingested it, absorbed it, breathed it in? So then we need to ask the following questions. Is the chemical toxic? What is the source and the amount of the exposure? What is the route and duration for exposures for the humans? Here we have the interventions. Remember that primary is promotion and prevention, where we advocate for the environments that promote health and health behaviors, focus on prevention of environment and breakdown, or prevent human exposure. Secondary is resolve. This can be at any of the individual, family, and community levels. They promote target screening programs and influence healthy policymakers to provide adequate access to diagnosis and treatment. And restore, prevent recurrence at all population levels. Here are some examples of health issues. Please watch the video on Flint, Michigan. This one is in this week's module to watch. When working with potential exposures, communication becomes the key. Be sure you're working with those that have the right information. Is the source a trusted one? Is the government aware of the situation? Having the right people involved is important too. Knowing what workers that could be exposed, how the community could be exposed, and just how the public in general could be exposed. Also consider the workers, community, and the public in helping you gather this assessment information. Timing is crucial. Timing is important in educating those involved with exposure or to prevent an exposure. Act on the information you have, not the hearsay of the other information. Keeping the facts is important. This helps reduce the fears the publics may have. The government is here to help you. Is there a permit for the chemical? There are reasons permits are necessary. The EPA monitors the use of the chemical as well as compliance. How close can a herbicide be sprayed close to a water source on a field? Are the agencies that use the chemicals compliant with the regulations? The government enforces the rules, fines, and ensures that hazards are cleaned up if appropriately spilled. Utilize the resources available to you. The federal government has the EPA and the FDA. At the state level, there are the PhD, EPA, and many associations. Utilize the resources available to you as the nurse. The federal government has the EPA, the FDA, and OSHA. At the state level, there's the Public Health Department, the local EPA, and many associations and organizations. What about the county level? Use this website listed, www.scorecard.org, and look at your county. How does the county fare with toxins, air pollutions, water pollutions, and food contamination? Remember, the power is in numbers. There are 2.7 million voices, watchdogs, and advocates that can make a change. Find a reliable source with trusted messenger and take action on all these levels. Your role as the nurse is to be an advocate, protect, educate, and regulate for a healthier environment.